Oh yeah, another sword video today. Why? Because we're still in Wano, that's why. And when you think of Wano, you think of samurai. And when you think of samurai, you think of swords. Maybe not necessarily giant anime buster swords, but swords nonetheless. Yeah, here's what you do. If you ever get your hands on a time machine, go to an anime convention and get yourself like an anime buster sword, or maybe get one forged. Go on like the Man-at-Arms or something. Get like Cloud's buster sword or like Squall's gunblade or something. And then take your time machine and go back in time to like the Sengoku period, like the Warring States period of Japan, and then just bury it somewhere out in the hills. And then hundreds of years later, archaeologists will dig it up and be like, oh my god, these are actually historically accurate. They used gunblades back in the Sengoku period. It's incredible. Final Fantasy was right all along. You know? Oh man. Samurai actually used a wide array of weapons, not just katanas and wakizashis, of course. I think the most standard ones we think of are bows and arrows. There's like naganatas, like polearm weapons and stuff. The kanabo, the war club, that was a thing. But I think a lot of people, like if you know about like historically accurate samurai, you would know this already, or if you've seen drifters, you would know this. But matchlock rifles were also very common, and that wasn't even something that popped up until like the 1800s. No, matchlock rifles were introduced in like the 1500s in Japan. They were actually introduced. I love telling this story. I've told it before, but I'll say it again as many times as I have to because it will be relevant when this character is finally properly introduced, okay? And you know immediately where I'm going with this. Okay, so matchlock rifles in Japan were originally called Onigashima because the island that they were introduced to the country was called Onigashima. It's south of Kyushu. And the Portuguese actually brought it over. Like there was like Portuguese merchants that brought it to Onigashima, introduced these new boomsticks to the population. But who is the person that kind of acted as like the liaison between the Japanese and the Portuguese and sort of acted like a translator between the two parties and was a huge help in introducing rifles into Japan for the samurai to use in their culture? That was, of course, the famous Chinese pirate Wang Ji! See, it all ties back around. I'm telling you what, when Wang Ji is finally introduced in this story, buckle up, it's gonna be crazy, alright? But yeah, in this video, we will be talking about the humble sword. We're going to be tackling a lot of swords in Wano. Now, I've already done a lot of videos on these. I've done videos about Enma and Ame no Habakiri and the Nidai. But we got a lot more swords to talk about. Just so many swords. I wrote them down. Just an insane number of swords, okay, that I really want to get into today. And, you know, it's crazy because when this arc started, Oda kind of gave us a really brief, like, recap of Meito when we first got introduced to the Nidai Katetsu in Tenguyama Hitetsu at, in Amagasa village, in Tama's village. You know, we had that little thing where like Meito grade, it means famous sword. Out of all of the blades in the world, you know, there's plenty of them that are unranked, but then like the best of the best that have the most renown are given a Meito. There are 12 Saijo Owazamono grade swords, like Mihawk's Yoru, and then there are 21 Owazamono, which is like the Wado, Enma, Ame no Habakiri, Nidai, Shusui, and then we got the real Owazamonos. There's 50 of those. That was the blade that like Yubashiri was part of that class, although I guess we don't have 50 anymore because Yubashiri was destroyed and laid to rest at Thriller Bark, so rest in peace, Yubashiri. I, Zoro, and Ippon Matsu will weep for you until the end of time. I actually really liked Yubashiri. It was probably like one of my favorite Zoro swords that he ever actually wielded. And then we have an unknown number of Wazamono. Okay, we don't know. And I don't know how many there are, if Oda never really came up with an exact number, or the reason he never gave an exact number was because there were so many Wazamonos, like the Sandai Katetsu, the third generation. There's just so many, there's no point in me even giving a number. But I'm looking at how the other numbers shake down, and it's like, okay, you got 12 Saijo, and then 21 Owazamono, and then 50 Ryo Wazamono. They seem to be in the ballpark of doubling. Not exactly, you know, 12 times 2 is 24, but 21's close enough. It's like Oda's like rounding up or down, kind of. So I like to think if we're gonna follow that path, there may be around 100 Wazamonos, or there could be a lot more, there could be a little less. Who knows why Oda didn't reveal the number for that one. But you know what I really wish Oda would start doing, especially in Wano? And I think this would fit perfectly, really. We see a lot of characters using swords. A lot of the scabbards use swords. In one of the last chapters, we had Denjiro, Kinemon, Ashura Doji, and Inuarashi using Oden two-sword style, his Nitoryu, so each of them had 2 swords. So we already knew Kinemon had 2 swords to begin with. What are the ranks of those? I would assume that Kinemon, the leader of the 9 red scabbards, the genius Machiavellian schemer of Wano, would probably have at least some ranked swords. So I'm imagining each of Kinemon's swords of the Foxfire style are both Meito. Meito. Ashura Doji, he always used just one sword, but we saw him just recently, he had two as well. So what's up with those? Inuarashi has a sword as a peg leg. Is that ranked? What about Denjiro? You know Denjiro has a ranked sword. Like, if Denjiro didn't have a Meito, that would just be weird. You know, he doesn't even have a Wazamono, really? He's freaking Denjiro. Have you seen that man's neck? Neck size directly references sword Meito rank. So basically, Denjiro has to have, like, yeah, there's the 12 Saijo, and then there's just the one great neck swords. And only Denjiro wields that one. You know what I mean? So, I really wish, the same way that Oda kind of introduces the characters with the little text box, you know, like Denjiro will show up and it'll be like Denjiro, you know, like little title card below him, you know how it's written and everything in Japanese and English. I really wish he would just do that for the swords, right? Like, he doesn't have to pay a lot of attention to them. He doesn't have to, like, stop the story and have the character like, ah, yes, this is my sword, Ame no Habakiri. It is an Wazamono grade sword, one of the 21 greatest. Like, we obviously don't have time for that in the story. We don't have time for every single character to jaw on about how cool their swords are every single time. It's like that episode of The Venture Brothers where Brock is like, why do you sword guys always gotta talk about how cool your swords are? You know what I mean? Like, we can't do that for every single character that has a sword that has a Meito, okay? So just use the title card thing. Like, going back to just, like, a headliner. Hold'em, you know, the lion dude, okay? He had a sword, and it looked like a pretty intricate sword. It had a cool guard to it, right? That was Hold'em's sword, you know? It would have been interesting if he just took out his sword, and we saw the little title card underneath him. You know, this is Hold'em, and this is his lion companion. That's also part of his stomach. And then when he pulls out his sword, we just see a little title card under that that's like, this is the Ryo Wazamono Lion Fang. And that's all. That's all we have to do. The one reason I can think that Oda might not be doing that is there might be, and it's possible this could happen, a sword encyclopedia at some point, like a sword data book. I know Artur already worked on that over on his website, Library of Ohara, but you think about it, like, there is more than enough material in the One Piece world to do that, and I think the thought has probably crossed Oda's mind at least once or twice, and he wouldn't even have to do most of the work on that. He would basically just have some of his assistants to, like, hey, go back through the One Piece manga and just find a bunch of really cool looking swords that characters used, and then just give them to me, and then all he would have to do is just name them and then give them a rank and make sure the numbers all line up and everything like that. Just fill out the Wazamono and the Ryo Wazamono and the O Wazamonos. Maybe save the Saijo for later. I really hope we get a lot more Saijos in the story. There's only 12 of them. I hope we at least get to find out all 12, because we only know about 3 right now. We know about Murakumo Giri, we know about the Shodai Katetsu, probably wielded by Samurai Gande. Murakumo Giri is Whitebeard's Baisento, or his Naginata. And then we have, Yoru, Mihawk's Yoru. But maybe Shanks' Griffin is a Saijo. You know, we'll probably get a lot of other Saijos. I at least hope they are capped off in the story. But, yeah, let's go down these swords. Now, out of the named swords that are the confirmed Meito rank, we only got 20. 20 swords in this entire manga. And this is even including one of them, the Orochi one, that I think is a light novel exclusive. Okay, that's 20 swords that have names that are confirmed Meito. Now, that doesn't mean every named sword is on this list. For example, the first one I put on here was Kawamatsu's Soto Muso. Okay, his blade that he uses, or the Kappa style. Okay, Kappa Ryu. Okay, so that is a named sword, Soto Muso. I apologize, I kept calling it Satsumo for so long because I think it was like a translation thing, but no, it's Soto Muso. And it's named, but it was never confirmed it has a rank. But once again, Kawamatsu is a member of the 9 Red Scabbards directly under Oden, and he's a Kappa, for God's sake. I'm pretty confident that Soto Muso is probably at least a Wazamono, and he doesn't come from Wano, he's a fisherman, of course, but he ended up on Wano at a young age, so I'm assuming, you know, it's at least a Wazamono, so that's the situation there with Kawamatsu. Then we got Ashura Doji. He has one sword that he used against Jack, but then he used 2 later on. Then we got Okiku's sword. Then we got Kinemon's 2 swords. Then we got Denjiro. You know, and that's just, right there, how many did I rattle off? That's like 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's 8 swords, like, right there. You know, just wielded by the scabbards alone, and we're not even through that. Freaking Orochi, he had a sword, like a regular sword, more of like a rapier kind of blade, or a saber that he used against Jack, and then when he got his leg ripped off, he added a peg leg sword. I don't know if the peg leg sword is going to be a Meito, but the sword that he wielded, like the rapier style blade, that could very well be a Meito. Now, Nekomamushi, I believe, used a spear as his primary weapon, and he also has his Catling gun right now, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a katana. But I am talking about specifically swords that originated from Wano. Blades like Sotomuso, which were probably forged in Wano by the swordsmiths there, and they probably have a lot of rank. Think of it this way. Out of the 20 named Meito rank swords that have been revealed so far in the story, 8 of them, so over 40% of them, originate from Wano. Every single Owazamono grade sword that we know of so far came from Wano, from a swordsmith from Wano. The Wado Ichimonji and the Enma were forged by Shimosuke Kozaburo. Ame no Habekiri was also a sword forged by Hitetsu. The Nidai Kitetsu was forged by Hitetsu's ancestor, one of the Kitetsu swordsmiths. Shusui was Ryuma's sword. Also, we actually don't know who forged Shusui, but it was Ryuma's famous sword, the god, the sword god, the samurai god, so I would assume it would also be forged in Wano. Maybe Yoru was forged in Wano. We don't know how that worked. Maybe Morokumogiri years ago was forged in Wano. Probably not, but it's possible. It's possible a lot more of these swords were forged there, right? So I'm thinking all of these ones, Sotomuso, Ashura Doji's, Kiku Nojo's sword, they were all forged in Wano, and they probably all have ranks. I'm just wondering, like, you know, why hasn't Oda at least... I'll put it this way. Maybe not every single one of these do, but at least, like, all of the swords I just rattled off, at least one of them has to be a Meito, right? So I'm thinking, like, okay, either Oda's waiting for maybe some kind of sword data book to come out, which I would buy that instantly. That would be an import instantly for me. But we got more just beyond that. Those are just the scabbards. Let's move on beyond that. We got Tenguyama Hitetsu's, like, flower sword. The sword that Luffy was going to take. So Luffy takes the Nidai Kitetsu, just basically steals it from the Tenguyama's house. He's just like, oh, a sword, cool, I'm taking this, bye. And Tenguyama's like, what? No, you're stealing my property, come back here. And Luffy's like, alright, well, if you won't give me this sword, give me the sword you're carrying. And Tenguyama's like, no, I can't give you this sword, this is my sword. Wait, what are you just taking my swords for? And he's like, this is another world-renowned blade. So I think right away, him calling it a world-renowned blade confirms it's a Meito, like right then and there. We just don't know the rank. And that's Tenguyama's, like, little flower sword. It's got, like, leaves coming out of the guard, or in lieu of the guard. Okay, so that's very interesting sword right there. We don't know the rank with that. Going on top of that, we also have King's sword. King, one of the calamities. So far that we understand is one of the highest rank, maybe the strongest right after Kaido in the Beast Pirates. So I'm assuming he probably has a Meito. Now, I should stop right here and like, kind of clarify something, though. I kind of am using the logic right now of, like, if it's a really badass character, has to have a Meito. That is not 100% true, because Law has Kikoku, and Kikoku is not a Meito. It was confirmed it wasn't. But it is a cursed sword, okay? So Law doesn't just walk away with a crappy little sword he bought at a shop, okay? Even though if it doesn't have a Meito rank, Law's sword is still cursed, so it still has something cool going on with it, alright? My point is here, I don't think Oda would give a really prominent, really strong character just, here's a random sword I just bought at a freaking shop for like 200,000 berries, here you go. You know what I mean? So these swords might not, you know, all be Meito, but maybe they might be cursed, maybe they might have some other history to them, they might still have names. A sword can have a name and not have a Meito, they're not exclusive. It can be, you know, you can have a, I guess swords that are all Meito have to have a name, but not every named sword has to be a Meito. It's one way of looking at it, right? But King, I mean, come on, the King's sword, that's the sword that freaking decapitated Orochi, for God's sake. The Orochi Slayer. Even if it wasn't a Meito, it became a Meito on that fateful day. At that hour, when Orochi's head was like, I am Lord Orochi! You will all bound before... You know, when he got decapitated, if it wasn't a Meito beforehand, it's a Meito now. And it's also a cursed blade because now the soul of Orochi is bound inside of King's sword, and now every time King draws his sword, he's got to listen to Orochi's voice, speaking to him from beyond the grave. That is canon now. King's like, Rora Nora Zoro, I will slay you this day. Shing! I am Lord Orochi! Hi, King! I am your sword now! Shit. Come on, let us slay the swordsman! Well, it was a good run. He just chucks it. It's just like, he's like weighing his options, like, should I keep fighting with this thing? Screw it, I'll just turn into a giant blazing pteranodon. That should be good enough. I don't need to use this sword anymore. But yeah, King Sword. I mean, come on. What about this? What about the giant katana that was outside Onigashima's front door? Come on now! That is relevant in some way. I mean, maybe Oda was just like, I'm gonna draw this really cool entrance to Muffin Mountain, the foreboding Skull Mountain. I'm gonna draw some cool Japanese lanterns everywhere, a nice little gazebo in the center. Oh, and a giant katana just sticking out of the ground. That sword is way too big for, like, a regular giant. Like, even Dorian Broggy could not lift up that sword. You know, Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido himself, that sword is way too damn big. Alright, so that means that that sword was probably wielded by some kind of ancient giant, like hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, the original inhabitants of Onigashima. The guy that, like, the skull of the giant that currently exists, like, that could have been his sword. You know, like, you have this giant, and then he died, and then his skull became Onigashima, and his sword is just embedded in the ground there. And nobody can lift it out, so they just turn it into, like, their lawn decorations. That's something you should also do. Go out and get yourself a giant katana and stick it in your yard like a pink flamingo, except way more badass. Or if you already have a pink flamingo, just go out and draw some, like, Kamen Rider sunglasses on them, you know, so, you know, Doflamingo. See what I did there? Yeah, One Piece style lawn decorations, they're coming back into vogue, definitely. So, that giant Onigashima sword, that's gonna be relevant, definitely. We got the Mimawari Gumi. We got the Mimawari Gumi, and we got the Oniwabanshu. Some of the Oniwabanshu, the ninjas, they use katanas, like Hanzo had a katana. Not every single one of them do. But the Mimawari Gumi certainly do, because they're like the Shinsengumi. They're like the Samurai Police Squadron, essentially. Which sounds like some kind of Super Sentai series. You know, Super Sentai! Samurai Police Squadron, go! Henshin! You know, like something like that. But you know, like Hotei, who is the leader of the Mimawari Gumi. You know, I talked about this when we were first getting to Wano, before we were introduced to Orochi properly, and we really understood who Orochi really was. You know, expectations were kind of shattered when we found out what Orochi was really all about, and what he looked like. But there was a thing there for a while where I was thinking about, like, okay, Orochi, Kurozumi Orochi, has taken over all of Wano. That means, and he shut down every, like, swordsmith, so you can't even, like, own a katana anymore in the country unless you're working directly for Orochi. So I'm thinking, what happened to all those badass katanas that existed in Wano when Orochi took over? Yes, there were a lot of them in the Ringo graveyard, but that was stated it was because that was like a tradition in Ringo, that when you die, you're buried with your sword. Like, your sword basically was your companion all throughout your life, and it will be serving as your monument, your tombstone when you pass on, okay? So that's where Kawamatsu, Onimaru? Was that Onimaru? Yeah. The fox, you know, or I guess, Gyukimaru is, like, you know, the bandit of the bridge, and that's where they were stealing all the swords, or, like, repurposing them from the tombstones and keeping them in that hidey hole until the rebellion happened, okay? But a lot of those swords, yes, some of them were maybe stolen from wanderers and travelers, others were taken from the tombstones and everything, but you know that the Kozuki clan that was headed up by Sukiyaki and then eventually Oden, you know that somewhere in that castle, there were some of the best swords in the entire country. Like, we're talking Owazamono, maybe even some Saijo Owazamono swords locked up in the Palace of Wano. You know, the sword capital of the entire world, the samurai capital of the world. Here's the castle right in the center of the flower capital. You know, Orochi, when he took power, he had access to some pretty damn cool blades. So what did he do with them? Maybe he gave them over to the not the Shinsengumi, the Mimawari Gumi, and maybe some over to the Oniwabanshu. Maybe Denjiro has one of them. Denjiro, you know, Kyoshiro, working as the head of the Yakuza, close personal friend of Orochi, drinking buddies for years. This was a guy Orochi thought he could trust with his life. You know, Denjiro really sold that cover. I'm telling you what, man. It could have maybe taken a few years, maybe 10 years or so. 10 years working for Orochi. He finally decides, like, for Denjiro's birthday present, he gives him, Kyoshiro, happy birthday! It's glorious that you are the head of the Yakuza, keeping me safe from all the Kozukis! Anyway, I got you this. This was a sword that stupid Sukiyaki had in his basement. Apparently, it's one of the greatest in the world. I'm giving it to you. And so Denjiro's like, oh, thanks, Orochi, yeah. You know, and just gives him one. That would be so damn poetic. And then Orochi turns out to be still alive, and then Denjiro slices his head off with it. Like, this is the sword you gave me for my birthday present. Oh no! Yeah, shing, just slices off one of his heads. Yeah. So, that's if Orochi's still alive. I don't know, Mott. Maybe he's just in the bunker. Maybe Orochi's still in the bunker. It's okay. I knew this was going to happen. Those damn Kozukis. I am Lord Orochi. Everything will be okay. Oh no, that doesn't sound good. I am Lord Orochi. Maybe I could sing a song in order to lighten my mood. He started winning, alien device did what it... Thank you, pitch art. I was waiting for a chance in a video to use that animation. I love it, especially the ending where Luffy just falls through the ceiling and just crushes Orochi. So yeah, make sure to go check out her stuff. I'll leave links to her Twitter and everything below. But awesome job there. Moving on though, we have Who's Who and Sasaki, both members of the Tobiropo that both use swords. Drake uses swords as well, where he has like that rapier. His could be a Meito, but it probably didn't originate from Wano originally. Black Maria and Page 1 and Ulti, I don't believe they use swords, but Sasaki and Who's Who definitely do, and they have like one sword they each wield, okay? So I'm thinking those are like probably the oldest members of the Tobiropo. Well, in terms of age, they are the oldest members of the Tobiropo. They're both in their 30s, but I'm assuming they've also been part of that, you know, group for the longest, and yeah, living in Wano for as long as they have, or being based in Wano for as long as they had. I think that, you know, Kaido would have ordered some really badass swordsmiths to make them some really badass swords, and then handed them over to his strongest, some of his strongest officers, just like King. Makes a lot of sense. Jack has swords too. He has like those weird tusk swords, those weird curved things, and Queen has like a cutlass, but King is the one that really prides himself. Like, he has like a legit katana. Like, that's like King's thing, right? But yeah, I don't think like every single headliner in Kaido's crew has a Meito. Maybe Hold'em did. Speed used a bow. She used like a Yumi. She didn't have a sword. But yeah, Who's Who and Sasaki, both members of the Tobiropo, high-ranking members of the crew, I think they both have at least a Wazumono grade sword. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Oda really wants to fill out the Saijo, but also the O Wazumono, because we are kind of filling out a lot of O Wazumonos lately. You know, Shusui, Ame no Habakiri, Enma, Wado, all from Wano, all was O Wazumonos. So I could see that totally. I could see freaking Sasaki and Who's Who both having O Wazumono grade swords. King having an O Wazumono. There's 21 total, and we only have like 5 we know about, so we got 16 more of these somewhere out there in the world. You know, Oda, you have opportunities here. Just keep filling them out. I would not be upset if we had one chapter where Oda's like, that's an Owazumono, that's an Owazumono. We find out about 7 Owazumonos in the same chapter. You know what? We could fill these out. We still have room. Let's keep going. Keep bringing the swords, right? Those are all of the ones that I wrote down. I also wrote like Hold'em's, but we already talked about his. But yeah, there's a lot more. I didn't write down like every single random member, like every pleasure or every waiter that has a sword, because they probably wouldn't have a Meito, obviously. But I went through like all the Tobiropo and the Calamities and like the high-ranking members of the crew. Kaido, of course, does not use a sword. He uses a big kanabo when he's not a dragon duck, you know, so that's not his thing. Big Mom's in Wano right now. What about Napoleon? Is Napoleon a ranked sword? I would probably assume it was. Was it a hat when she turned it into a homie, or was it a sword she turned into a homie and then just added hat powers to it? I don't know how that works, but I'm assuming Napoleon, it has a name. It might very well be a Meito. What about Cracker's Pretzel? The Great Sword Pretzel. These swords were probably not forged in Wano because of their names. You know, I highly doubt like I am the great Shimosuke Kozaburo, the mightiest of swordsmiths in Wano. I forged Enma, the blade that can cut through hell itself. My next masterpiece is the sword pretzel. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you know, maybe in like his twilight years, Kozaburo is like in his 90s, maybe his mind's starting to go, maybe a little bit of dementia. He's still forging swords, though. He might still be alive in the East Blue, who knows? So he forges a new sword and he's like,
Yes, my new masterpiece. I will name this Owazamono grade sword, the great name of, Fizzle Whizzle. Grab the mighty Fizzle Whizzle, Zoro, and wield it to your dying day.
You know what I mean? Like, it might be something like that. But just from the swords that I rattled off here, like, Kawamatsu has 1, Ashura Doji's got 2, that's 3, Okiku is 4, Kinemon has 2, that's 6, Denjiro had 2, that's 8, Inuarashi has 2, that's 10, Tenguyama's 11, King's is 12, the giant one on Onigashima, 13. What about the ones wielded by the Mimawari Gumi? That's like a bunch of swords. And then the Oniwabanshu have a few more. Who's Who, Sasaki, that's 2, Hold'em had 1, a lot of the headliners had swords, like... So there's opportunity here. There's opportunity. So let me know below how you feel about these swords and their ranks and which is which. Which ones have ranks, which ones don't. Which ones don't. Which ones have ranks, which ones don't. And how would you feel about, like, at the end of Wano, Oda announces that I'm going to be releasing a sword encyclopedia, or maybe it would be in the One Piece magazine too. Like, have a whole page in the One Piece magazine where it just lists all these swords. Like, finally revealed in the One Piece magazine, here are the 21 Owazamonos, or at least the ones that have been revealed so far in the story, and we can, like, cover some of these. Like, oh yes, King's was an Owazamono, and it's named Pteranodon's the Dino Fury, Dino Thunder. That's okay. King's sword has to be named Dino Thunder. Yep, it's named Dino Thunder. That's also canon. Alright, hope you guys enjoyed the video on the mighty swords of Wano. Thanks for watching. One Piece Chapter 993 will be out tomorrow. I hear good things. Tekking, signing out.